Hey, hello, everyone. Uh, I am Ben Ridings. I'm the curator for Cape May Mac. And just real quick, this is going to be the last Lunch and Learn until September. We're taking a little bit of a break during the summer. And this one is, I'm really excited about because we have Hope and Rachel from the Center for Community Arts doing this one. So it's going to be really interesting. And with that, I'll turn it over to Hope and Rachel.
Hello, I'm Hope Gaines. I'm a member of the Community History Committee. And Rachel is our, I forget her title, but she's basically director of the Community History Project and tender of records and supervisor of raucous meetings and everything else. And Rachel has this PowerPoint on her screen, and we're going to scroll through some slides and kind of describe what you see. So there'll be some text, but we'll enhance it a little bit and try to point out some of the pictures and some of the objects and buildings that you'll see in the slides.
And we'll also have some audio as well from our walking tour.
Right. Okay.
Okay, you ready?
Ready, go. These are our founding mothers. CCA, as you can see by the text, was founded in 1995. And these 12 women who were artists and community activists happened to have been 6 Black women and 6 white ones. And there was some activity around town between the teenagers and the police. It was just, kind of disturbing. And they all got together and they said, these kids need a place to go. So they gathered mostly here. This is Carolyn Peterson. I'm sorry, I heard a whistle. Was that something I shouldn't know? Anyway, never mind. They gathered mostly at Carolyn Peterson's house and eventually developed the Center for Community Arts. And then they said, I want to point out a couple of the people who were in it. Rachel, can you go back one? Okay, where is she? This is Emily Dempsey. She is still with us. She's still a founding mother and extremely active. Becky Wilson, you might know, she's around town as well. Susan Zipper and Patty Chambers, they're still all over Cape May and they still come in and out of CCA when we call them. Okay.
Next.
As it says here, they wanted to deal with some of these racially charged problems. Some of the kids are playing boom boxes and kind of acting up. And then they wanted to do some activities just for kids, and they wanted a vehicle for local artists. The panel that we're showing here, this is Barbara Friels, who is 97 now. This is Emily Dempsey again. And you can see she's, and this is Cordelia Howard Bounds, and we'll talk a little bit about her a little bit later. She was a teacher at the Franklin Street School. This is one of the art programs that were developed. It's a silk screening project. We had all kinds of art after school and evening art programs for kids.
Okay, next.
Okay, next. And this is Franklin Street School. I'm guessing most of you live in or around Cape May. Is that so? Maybe not. But Franklin Street School was a segregated elementary school. It was built in 1928. And it closed as a school in 1948 when New Jersey's Constitution outlawed segregation. And then it just sort of sat there. For a while, it was a vocational school. It was used during some of the Great Society programs for educational and activities for teenagers and children. It was a summer police station for a while, and they used to store stolen bikes in there. And then it was just neglected. So this group of women said, well, how about using the Franklin Street School for this community center? And began to raise money, raised quite a lot of money, enough to stabilize it, to restore the windows, to seal up the roof and the windows, and to clean the inside, which was toxic with mold and pigeon droppings and many other things. And now, after 26 years, finally, the county library system along with cooperation with the city and CCA, and as you can see, New Jersey Historic Trust, this building will become the new public library for Cape May. And it'll be a couple of years before it's open. It'll also be a community center. CCA's office will be right there, along with our radio station. Okay. So, yeah, you'll see our programs, Youth Arts Program. That was the original program. It met on Saturday nights and just had really beautiful arts programs for children, all led by some of the artists around the city. We've held Dr. Martin Luther King birthdays, the Great Cookie Exchange. We missed for the first time in 2020. It had been running since 1995 and will happen again next year. It's the first Monday in December. Hundreds and hundreds of children. It's free. We bring cookie dough, kids make and decorate cookies, and baskets full of flashy decorations and hats, and everybody has a good time. And now we have the WCFALP 101.5 radio station, capemayradio.org, which streams 24 hours a day on your computer, or you can turn it on your actual radio at 101.5. And our community history program, and you're watching the results of that now. We started that very early because we needed justification to preserve the Franklin Street School. And we got the testimony from people who had been at that school and had enough documentation to go to the county and the state and have the school preserved as significant to New Jersey Black history. So whatever happens, that building's been preserved forever. Okay. So our community history program does all the things that you see there on the screen. It began because as we started gathering all this history from the Franklin Street School alumni, we learned more and more about everything else that went on in Cape May that had to do with the Black community that had pretty much no one had known, no one thought about it. So we started learning about not only about the school, but about the business community, which we'll talk about a little bit later, where people lived, what they did, who they were. And we started gathering stuff. People started bringing in photographs and objects and mementos and stories. Mostly they would give them to Emily Dempsey, who knows everybody in town. And then they have been accessioned and stored. A lot of them are at the County Museum right now, waiting for display. Out of that, we developed the African American Heritage Walking Tour, which generally takes place June through December, but we're on hiatus right now because I'm the one who gives the tour and I hurt my hamstring and can't do it. So as soon as we get someone else to do the tour, that will be revised. All the artifacts and photographs and objects, everything that we've collected, we have determined the John and Dolly Nash African American History Archives, because Mr. Nash gave us so much information and photographs and just everything, so that we've dedicated the whole collection to him. The oral history program continues. And we also have this cell phone walking tour. If you go around Cape May, around certain sites, you'll see metal plaques in front of certain buildings, Ocean First Bank, some of the stores and shops around, and those are programmed so that you can turn your cell phone on, dial a certain number and hear a recording. And those are some of the recordings we're going to play for you later. And then there's the Underground Railroad tour, which mostly a member of our committee, Barbara Dreyfus, did the research and writing of the tour. And we do that every Saturday in partnership with MAC. Okay. Okay. This is part of our walking tour. So we, excuse me. Rachel, do you want to play this now or the next slide? You can tell what we're doing, right?
I'm sorry, say it again.
You want to play Becky now?
Oh, Becky or Emily?
No, Becky.
Oh, Becky. Okay. Yes. Let me, hold on 1 second. I had this right on up, and now I am,
And now she disappeared.
hold on.
Yep, maybe not. Okay,
Where did
well,
my,
I'll talk while you find her.
okay, yeah, keep talking.
Okay.
Oh, here.
The walking tour begins on Franklin Street, and we walk down to where Rotary Park is now. And that area from the Rotary Park all around Jackson Street, Elmira Street, and that area was a predominantly Black business district. So as we walk along Lafayette, we point out residences and various businesses. And when we get to the Rotary Park, we describe where these businesses were, and we have some pictures here to show you what they did. It was all the businesses that you would expect in a small town: shoemakers, restaurants. There were a few boarding houses, grocery stores, the typical business, small town businesses, and they were scattered through that area where the park is now. There were actually little streets inside where Rotary Park is now, on Jackson, on Lafayette, and up towards Elmira.
All right. I'll go
Okay.
ahead.
African Americans have been in Cape May County since the 1700s. In the 1920s, African Americans were about 30% of Cape May City's total population and owned about 60 businesses. The business district was much larger in the early 20th century than it is today and had many more services. This park was constructed during the urban renewal period. This area was densely built and contained the greatest concentration of Black-owned businesses. There were guest houses as well as boarding houses and tradespeople who included an auto mechanic, a carpenter, a plasterer, a blacksmith, and a wallpaperer. An employment agency for the African Americans who came for summer work stood on Manton Street. Mr. Bill Allison, who owned several properties, operated a billiard parlor, and he welcomed local teenagers in to play pool for free. Collier's Liquors was originally a speakeasy owned by the current owner's great uncle, and later it was Charlie's Bar, a popular nightclub with entertainers and audiences of both races. I remember this block very well, as it had several homes, one of which was the home of a deputy mayor later on during the urban renewal period. I also remember my mother sending me to Miss Kitty's, which was a beauty salon on the very corner of the street. The area has changed drastically, and it is no longer such a community with African Americans with homes as their primary residences.
Make a right onto Jackson Street
Oops.
and walk.
Oh, never mind.
For more information, go to
There we go.
That is a recording from the automated walking tour that we told you about that you could do with your phones. And that's at the where Rotary Park is, and the sign is actually on a tree in front of Cape May Stage. That's me. Here we are.
Yes. Yeah.
Rachel's computer has a mind of its own, and it's just flipping around. So
I'm gonna change. I'm getting back to where we were. Okay. We're
okay,
good.
okay. This is a little history of education in Cape May. On your left, that one. Does my cursor work on that? All right. Okay, that is the Annex School, and that was built in 1901, where the Cape May Firehouse is now. Before that, there was a school on Washington and Indian and Queen Street. There's a double house there, and that was not segregated. This was built in 1860. They segregated the schools, and the Annex School became the Black school. And there was a school built around the corner on Lafayette Street, and that was the white school. This is a second grade class from the annex. And this is Franklin Street School, which was built in 1928 because the annex had basically become impossible to work in, and everybody wanted something. Everyone in town wanted a better looking school. So this building was demolished. We have the firehouse there now, and the Franklin School went up. This is John Bose, Emily Dempsey's uncle or grandfather, or standing in front of the Franklin Street School.
All right, next one. Let's see, where
Yep.
are we?
Next. Okay, this is the West Cape May segregated school. And this is William J. Moore, who was the superintendent and teacher there, and who was also a tennis pro. And the tennis center here in Cape May is named for him because that was what he did in the summer. This is one of the classes, the second grade class from West Cape May School. And this is the Cape May High School graduating class. And
Or eighth grade.
eighth grade, sorry. And this was typical of what they did. The house behind here, was built by Attir Howard, who was the houseman at the Physic Estate. And he bought that property and built it up from scratch, built the house bit by bit by bit, dug this pond. It was just legendary. And so it was traditional to have these graduating classes come around, sit in his pond and have the graduation picture taken there. The house is gone, but we have an extremely detailed description of how it was built from his daughter, Cordelia Howard Bounds, who I mentioned earlier, was a teacher at the Franklin Street School. She taught Emily Dempsey kindergarten and first grade, and she was with us until last year. She died at the age of 104. You can imagine the treasure of information that we have from her. It's good. Okay.
I should point out that it's the annex school and the the white kids from the eighth grade class photo taken together.
Ah,
That was tradition.
right. This is Lafayette Street School, which was around where the Acme loading dock is now. And this was it was originally a white school, originally became integrated when it became the high school. Below it is Cape May City Hall, which was the high school for the city, built in 1917. Next to that is Cordelia Howard Bounds. And here is Cordelia Howard Bounds at her graduation. So that's her. And this is her best friend, Janet Eldridge, and that's Janet Eldridge there. This was taken not that long ago. Was it maybe 10 years ago or so?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, right. Janet Eldridge went to West Cape May School, and they were among the children who would gather, the white and black children would gather, and they would walk to school together, and then the white children would go here, and the black children would go here. And then they would meet again after school and hang out and play together. And that was the case in both Cape May and West Cape May. Okay.
Hope, do you want to mention about Cordelia, supposed to be the valedictorian?
Oh, yes. Cordelia was the top scholar in her graduating class. Her brothers had been the valedictorian the year or two before that. And so they looked at this again and they said, we don't know what their thinking was, but they said to her, well, we're not going to have a valedictorian this year. We're going to have the first, I think they were called the first scholar and the second scholar.
Mhm.
So she did not have the title of valedictorian because her brothers had had that before. And we can guess at the other reasoning behind that. They were a little uncomfortable with having all these Black children as valedictorians. And these are, if you go to the corner of Franklin Street and Lafayette Street and up and down the block there on Lafayette, it's a significant corner to Black history. These two pictures on the left are what's now known as the Yellow Church, and these days is a condo. But it was started out as a white Baptist church. The Baptists eventually outgrew that church and they moved down to what the present Baptist church on Gurney Street. and a Black Methodist congregation bought the church, and it remained with them until about 10 years ago, a little longer than that, when the Methodist, I don't know what you call it, Methodist organization was going to buy it, and they eventually were sold, and it was turned into the condominiums. This is what it looked like originally. It used to have a tower, which was blown over by a storm. This is Macedonia Baptist Church, built there about 1901, but the congregation was actually in effect before that, and then met at different people's houses around Franklin and Lafayette Street. This is the AME Church on Franklin Street. Those of you who live in Cape May know a little bit of the history of that. There was a fire here 2 springs ago. The power line fell over and started a fire, and the fire kind of blew up the tower and just only seriously damaged by fire, the front, the foyer, and the tower itself. And the rest of the building was damaged by smoke, but was not destroyed. And there's a great story. We were standing in front of it one day after it and talking to the firefighters. And they said they used to stand out there and say, what are we going to do if that place ever catches on fire? So they actually knew what to do. And as soon as the power was cut, they just ran in with the fire preventive and just filled the building with it, and that's how the building was saved. Nowadays, if you go over there, all that shingling has been stripped. The stained glass windows have been taken out. They're going to be restored. The building is beautiful. It's just looks like a nice building instead of a, sort of a dumpy gray thing just sitting there. And the city has taken that and is restoring it, and is part of what they plan to be a celebration of that corner as part of Black History, Cape May's Black History, and also just a whole series of museums. And this is the Macedonia Church Choir from many years back. Okay?
You want me to play Emily's now? Emily's.
Sure. Emily Dempsey is going to tell you a little bit about Emily Dempsey was baptized at AME Church, so she knows a lot about what's going on there.
Look around this community and see the Civic and Education Center. The practice of segregation began in 1862 and continued until 1948. This was 6 years before the Supreme Court ruling of Brown versus Board of Education, which outlawed segregation completely. The Franklin Street School was the school I attended. I was 4.5 years old. You had to be able to tie your shoes, to be able to go to school and ask for the bathroom. I was anxious to go. Cordelia Howard Bounds was my kindergarten first grade teacher. But when it opened, my mother's class was the first class to enter Franklin Street School. And they moved from the annex school next door. And it was very clean. It was built for the African-American population, and a gymnasium in the back for the high school. Now, in talking to Miss Bounds, Cordelia Howard Bounds, the high school was never segregated. And I asked her why, and she said simple economics, because most of the students that left high school or didn't finish high school had to go out to work to help the family. So why build a school when the population was so small? In 1901, Lafayette Street School was built where the Cape May Acme is located now. Later, the white students moved in, it became an elementary school, and the high school students moved into the new building on Washington Street. Later in 1948, the African-American students from Franklin Street School integrated into the Lafayette Street School with the white students.
3 African-American churches are on this block. Across from the firehouse is a gray church, Allen AME Church. It was built in 1888. This congregation was founded by Stephen Smith, an abolitionist and one of the founders of the National African American Episcopal churches. We will tell you more about Stephen Smith at his summer house. At the corner is the former Franklin Street United Methodist Church, known as the Yellow Church. It was built in 1879 for a white Baptist congregation. In 1913, they moved to Gurnee and Columbia, and the Black Methodist congregation moved in. The church remained active until 2003, when the congregation merged with the First Methodist Church, and the Yellow Church was converted into condominiums. Right next to the church was an African American Masonic Hall. Across the street from the Yellow Church, on the corner, is the Macedonia Baptist Church, which was built in 1910 by a congregation that has been active since 1895. They sold to the city the lot on which the Franklin Street School was built. Walk to Lafayette Street and turn right to hear more.
Okay.
The wedding that you see there is Yvonne Wright Gary, who was CCA's program administrator since the beginning, and she is also still active on the history committee. Okay.
All right.
The gentleman up there in the middle of the picture on the upper left is Paul Robeson. And on the right, you see, which now First Ocean Bank, and on whatever it was then, on that corner was an auditorium, and that was a community center for the Black community. And it was dedicated as a Black USO in 1940. I'm going to get my year wrong. 1945. The picture below is basically the entire Black community who came to that dedication to hear Paul Robeson. Cordelia Howard Bounds was the program director for this. And this is probably our most prized possession. It was given to us, the original was given to us by Emily Dempsey's mother. And we have fixed it up, we have blown it up like this, we have done all kinds of things to it. And right now, Emily has engaged everyone she knows to go through here and pick out every single picture and identify that person. And we're actually pretty far along. I think she's got probably 3/4 of them now. And so when we have a history committee, there's in the background, there's people going, oh, there's my Uncle Joe. Oh, there's my whoever. And it's really quite successful. It's a lot of fun, but that is our best, probably our best thing. Maybe the beach pictures are better. Okay, go on.
Hope, did you want me to play Derek's or no?
No, let's go. Let's move on.
Okay.
We're talking about urban renewal. What happened to that Black neighborhood was it was demolished. Part of the Great Society programs were plans to demolish poor neighborhoods, slum neighborhoods, and build better public housing. Haynes Row was behind where the dog park is now, if you know Cape May, Lafayette Street, and beyond that. And these were the houses that were along there. Emily Dempsey lived in one of them for a while. But the entire area that we've been discussing, the Rotary Park, most of Lafayette Street, Jackson Street, that whole area was just completely demolished. The parking lot next to Collier's Liquors, all of those were those buildings and houses that we saw, and were replaced with this public housing on, oh, not that one.
Sorry.
on Lafayette Street, and in various sections along Lafayette Street. Okay.
We kind of looked at that picture already.
Yeah. This is part of we've seen that picture, but that's part of the neighborhood that was demolished on Jackson and Lafayette Street. And that's me and Emily doing that. You recognize this building again if you live in Cape May. It's on the corner of Jackson and Broad Street. And it was Richardson's Hotel, also known as the New Cape May Hotel. We think that's Mr. Richardson right there, the owner. You
Mhm.
can look at the car and judge the year that this photograph was taken. And you can see over here that there was a balcony there and a porch in those years. It was one of 5 hotels in Cape May that were for Black visitors. They were owned by African Americans. There were 4 others, and there was one around this area, and then there was one on Corgi Street. This is really the only building that's remaining, and one of the, it's on that audio tour. As you see, there's a little plaque over there on the side, and you can get some history of that. See, I like this beach. This is one of the best pictures too. That's Adrian Capehart, who was a city council member at one point. We now have the names of all of these lifeguards forming the pyramid. I got them from Barbara Friels. I talked to her a couple of weeks ago. So when we get this picture out, well, all those people who are lifeguards on the Grant Street Beach, which was unofficially designated as a Black beach. You can see though, they had a nice pavilion, they had a place to go, they had concessions. The beach, no part of Cape May was legally segregated, and we cannot find any segregation laws at all. But there was obviously de facto segregation. And one of those, one of the manifestations of that was the Grant Street Beach. It was convenient walking distance to where most of the African-American community was. And that's where they went. They said, well, that's where our friends were. If they wandered up the beach, they were asked to leave. This is Mr. Dale. And this is Dale's Auditorium, the exterior of what we showed you before that was dedicated as the USO. This is Jackson Street. If you look way down there in the corner, that's the new Cape May Hotel, Richardson's Hotel.
Down here, Hope?
What?
Is it this in this direction?
That one right there, yeah. Mr. Dale owned several properties around town, including what's left of a very elegant hotel. It was on Lafayette and Jefferson. There's a small red brick building on the corner. That was part of the Dale Hotel. Okay. Again, this is more of Jackson Street. This is the Presbyterian Church, which is now Cape May Stage. So you can get a little bit of perspective here. So this is Jackson Street. This is Lafayette. Those trees are where the park is now. And this is a few years ago, actually. You can see, you can go there and there. If you look down on the lower picture here and here, and that was, remember, if some of you remember the Irish store, which is not there anymore, that's now a vacant lot. Okay. Some of the recreation, well, we've talked about the beach, of course. This is the Cape May Giants. It was a local baseball team. The manager was Mr. Washington, Mr. Jim Washington, senior. His son is one of the players here, and his grandson is alive and still telling stories about this team. They were not part of the Negro League, but they did play some Negro League teams. There was the baseball field on the beach, on Beach Avenue. There was also one on the corner of Columbia and Madison. And they played pretty well, and they practiced a lot. I'm happy to say 2 years ago, we were about to have a celebration of the Negro League 100th anniversary in Cape May, and then COVID hit. And plans are now revived again, and we're going to have that shortly, probably in just a few months. So there will be a lot of detail out about the Cape May Giants then. And this is just your basic picture of a bunch of kids playing. We all have pictures like this. This is Emily Dempsey. We've showed you her a couple of times. These are 3 of her friends. It says here, Charles Jr., Margaret, and Barbara, but we don't know any about them. Back here is Banneker House. And that was one of the 5 Black-owned hotels in Cape May. And it was owned by Stephen Smith. You heard earlier, the founder of the AME Church, and a leader of the Underground Railroad activity in Philadelphia. And so they used to have conferences there and educational events as well as just people coming to Cape May for the summer like people do nowadays. It has long gone. Next to it is the Franklin Street School, which we'll show you later. Okay. I'm sorry, not Franklin Street School, Stephen Smith House.
Hope, do you want to mention this building still standing next to the church?
Oh, yes, that was the rectory for the Yellow Church for a while, and then it was CCA's headquarters for a while. Now it's a private house. And CCA's
Yellow
headquarters
Church is right here.
on the corner. Okay. Oh, all right, just so get some perspective. See that right there? That's Collier's through there. That's the balcony that we showed you earlier that was attached to the Richardson's Hotel, the new Cape May Hotel. And this is the corner now. There's Collier's down there. In those days, I think the Collier's was Paul's Bar. I think it was after the time that it was a speakeasy. And this is that new Cape May Hotel, now a series of stores. This is on your lower left is John Nash and his wife Dolly in front of the Planter Hotel. Now I have to look at my notes because I'm going to forget some names if I don't do this right. The Planter Motel was named for Dolly's great uncle, who was Robert Smalls, a mixed race slave in Beaufort, South Carolina. And he was pilot of a transport boat. He couldn't be the captain because he was black and he was a slave, but he was the pilot. And there was another boat there that was a Confederate transport boat. And he and a group of fellow slaves conspired, took the Planter, captured it in the middle of the night, and took it across the bay and turned it over to Union ships. The boat was the Planter. And he actually later, he bought his freedom, his wife's and daughter's freedom. He became a Congress member and led quite a prominent and successful life. And if you go to Beaufort, which I have not, but other people have, there are monuments and commendations to him all over the city. There's a book called Capital Men, which actually Emily loaned me, and I haven't finished reading it. And the first chapter is called The Boat Thief, and it's about Robert Smalls. You can see what it is now. It's the boarding house. Still there on Lafayette Street. After it was the Planter Motel, it was another motel, and now it's a boarding house, but it's still there. Okay. That is the Stephen Smith House. That is, and the Banneker House was just to the right of it. There you go. Stephen Smith was a leader, as we say, of the Underground Railroad. Founded the AME, the National AME Church, as well as helped found the local AME Church here. Okay. Oh, look for our new book. We are putting all this information into an actual book. And it will be out. We have no idea. We're hoping by the end of summer, by the fall, to have it completed, not necessarily in book form, but have all the chapters and all the other elements and photographs and everything completed on it. It will be called A Feeling of Community. And that was the name of our very first exhibit. We have almost always have an annual exhibit here at the MAC grounds, not for the last couple of years for obvious reasons. A Feeling of Community is a quote from one of the people we interviewed, Lois Smith. And she described how people lived and how they took care of each other. And she said, it was community. It was a feeling of community. And that's been kind of our favorite line since then. Okay, do we have questions?
I have a little bit of quiet behind the background. You're going to hear some string. I'm going to ask anybody that doesn't want to come off mute to submit your questions through the chat to all. or to Ben, and he can read them off. Otherwise, I'm going to go back on mute, but please feel free to ask questions.
We did have a few questions.
Okay.
so I'm just going to turn around and ask you.
Okay.
You spoke of the Franklin Street School going into becoming the library. So we just had a question. Do you know what will happen to the current library building?
We don't. As far as we know, the meetings that we've had and the city council meetings that we have had, that current library will not disappear. It will become something. And people are also worried about the memory of Mrs. Elwell, who did so much to found that library. There will be some commemoration and mention of her in the new library. She will not be forgotten, nor will the building.
And what's interesting, I recently came across a newspaper clipping where the library was having a book sale at the Franklin Street School to raise funds for the new library, which will now soon be the old library.
There you go.
So everything comes full circle.
Also, sorry. You mentioned this, but maybe you can expand upon it. Will the church that had the fire across from Franklin Street School be rebuilt or restored?
Yes, it's being restored even as we speak. If you go over there, as I said earlier, if all that gray shingling has been stripped off, and underneath it are these beautiful boards. I mean, it's in really good shape because it was protected all those years by that gray shingling. Those front stained window glasses were destroyed by the fire. The rest of them were not, and they have been removed and are being restored. The interior will be restored. Everything will be fixed up and restored, and it will be some sort of community gathering place. We're not sure what yet, but it will be something like that.
Okay, and one more. Where is the school in West Cape May?
It's not there. If you go over to the West Cape May Elementary School, there's a field heading as you're facing the school. It's to the left. There's a huge playing field, and this school was in that area. It was demolished a long time ago. Nobody even remembers when.
Those were the questions I had.
Okay.
I saw.
Anything else? Okay then.